Welcome to the Maker's Playbook, the podcast where we talk all about what it's really like to make a living from the things you make. I'm your host, Rebecca Ikes-Kara. Hello, and welcome back. Now, I know you hear me say this just about every week, and with all sincerity, I do mean it every week. But this week, I am really excited about the interview we have lined up for you. Why? Because I feel like I've finally filled a gap in our chats here on the podcast. You see, when I first started this podcast, I wanted to make sure that we had a diverse breadth of stories. In fact, it was paramount to the focus of what this podcast would be if I was going to do it. I was looking out onto the internet for how many ceramicists and makers made a living from the things that they make, and all I really saw was one example. People hustling on Instagram to grow an audience, push that audience to Etsy or an online store, do a massive shop update, then lose their minds with packaging and shipping for a couple of days, and do it all over again. And I thought to myself, there had to be other options out there. And thus, the Maker's Playbook podcast was born. I wanted to hear from makers still side hustling their work, in the thick of it, trying to get to that next phase. I wanted to hear from people like me, full-time, no employer safety net, who had made this crazy leap. And I also wanted all of us to learn from the people having done this for decades, for those days when we're just about ready to give up, so that we could all still hold on to the hope that there is, in fact, a way to make this all work. But as I've had these conversations over the past year, I've noticed some trends. It's really easy to find makers and artists with partners or spouses that are traditionally employed. And obviously, there's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. But it does give a little added layer of security when it comes to this risky world of entrepreneurship. I also noticed how many makers were living in more rural communities, places where the cost of living was more affordable, thus making self-employment a bit less of a gamble and something a bit more manageable. Again, nothing wrong with any of that. In fact, Francesco and I dream of the day that we have a farm. But what if you wanted to live in a big city? What if you're happiest amidst the hustle and bustle? And what if you're on your own? No spouse with a 401k or employee subsidized healthcare plan. This has been a big gap that I've been feeling these last few months. Frankly, I wanted the example for myself. And today, that gap is no longer, my friends. Today, I'm chatting with David Kim, a solo potter in Chicago, specializing in partnering with restaurants, hotels, and interior designers for commissions of all shapes, sizes, and kinds. Let's dig into it. Hey, David, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. It's glad to be here.
Thanks so much for making the time. I was introduced to your work through Danielle over at Monsoon Pottery, and I'm super excited because I was saying before we hit record here that I'm excited to interview more potters that are in different areas, and living in Chicago, being a full-time artist is no joke, as I know well. So I'm excited to dig in. Well, for anybody who doesn't know you, how would you introduce yourself?
I guess I would say I'm mainly a potter, but my main material I work with is clay. And I'm not necessarily stuck in just making pottery. I like to use the material to explore forms or ideas that me or my clients would create together.
Since you mentioned clients, who do you mostly make for?
Most of my pieces or wares go to restaurants or people in the industry or interior designers and hotels, and just other people that find me through there who have an idea of what they want, and I help them create it.
When you were first getting started, was there a way that kind of broke into that space? Because what I find so interesting is most potters out there, and independent makers at least, I think, assume, okay, I've got a open a web shop or open an Etsy account, and I'm going to sell one piece to one person, and I'm going to do that 100 times, and that's how the business works, which is an option, but I like your model a lot better because you can sell 100 pieces to one person.
Yeah, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
The selling one at a time it's fun because like you have more control of what you're selling. And when I work with clients, it's more like we try to find a middle ground of what they want and what's possible, what's not possible. And my expertise is in the material and the process, and their usually expertise is the design, the final outcome of how the piece is gonna present with what they're doing. And sometimes things aren't possible, some things are, and we always find a middle ground. It's all about finding that balance.
It sounds like there's a lot more communication on the front end that might turn away some potters and is a place that you can lean into.
Yeah, and like for me, my interest is in the material and working with people that have other ideas than mine. I use my hands more as a tool for them, and my hands they learn too as I work with them, and then I can use what I learned from those projects for personal projects that I have ideas for, like ways to make the clay bend in certain ways or building sculptures in a way that I didn't think of before. And I think that's really rewarding, and it's also taxing too. It takes a lot of time, and you get a lot of failures too, you know. And I always say like pottery or ceramics is the art of failure. It's trying to always figure out what went wrong and getting over that hump. And that's the hardest part when things don't work out and you feel so defeated, and then you figure it out. Most of the clients I work with I'm lucky that all my clients that I work with are just so they understand. And I also take that as a responsibility for myself to try a lot harder to like make things work, you know?
How do you manage that expectation with them as far as if you're doing something new because it's what they want, but there's obviously a certain element of experimentation and there's so many phases in ceramics where things can go wrong. And so like managing the time frame, because also being a full-time maker, deadlines are a very real thing that you probably have to meet.
Yeah, it's an art school project. Everyone like you're just working to the last minute on everything, or
oh God,
school project. And
at least you don't have to share the studio space with anybody else anymore. Where you're like, if I have this whole kiln, I'm fine.
yeah, exactly. And so exactly. So that's very nice to have. So managing the time.
Yeah. Just especially with that experimental piece, because if I'm making the assumption that if you're making a set of dishware for a restaurant client and it's a line that you're known for, it's a shape you're used to, you can knock that out, at exactly how long it takes.
Mm-hmm. When you get familiar with the material and the clay and how the clay that I'm working with reacts to whatever the drying stage and stuff, you just know you can't rush this part. If it's porcelain, you can't rush it at all. It's very, very
finicky.
Yeah. And sometimes, like one time I made some pieces out of porcelain and the piece is actually warped a little. It was supposed to be it's like a pedestal dish, and they warped a little, and it gave the porcelain more of a natural look. Like it looked like a river pebble stone, and it was awesome. At first I was like, oh crap, like they all warped, and then I took another look at it, and it was just like, actually that's pretty good. Like it actually looks better, more natural.
Yeah. How did you originally get into ceramics then, thinking about this knowledge of the material?
I remember like the first time I made clay was like in elementary or junior high school, and I made 2 pots on the wheel, and it just felt so like elementary or junior high school level art class, and the teacher had some clay, and we did like everything from slab building to hand building to wheel throwing, and every aspect of it was so fun. And I made this really cool race car. It unfortunately exploded in the kiln. And
naturally.
And oh man, I went back at it and I made this cool dinosaur. And then it was just a surreal experience for me when I was a kid. And I got into it in high school, senior, junior year. I got back into it, and I had great teachers there then too. And then I went to college. And for me, when I was a kid, I really didn't like to do something if I didn't want to do it. Like I was an all right student, and I had no motivation. I would never do it. And then, but for art, like anything in art, it was just like a really nice escape and get my hands busy. My mind is getting stimulated, and it was so fun. And my dad's a chef, so, and my mom helps him out at the restaurant. And I guess like my mom noticed that she found my sketchbook and stuff, and she wanted me to be like accountant or like something like that would make a lot of money and
to provide for her retirement, man.
And then she, my mother, she noticed that I was always into art and stuff. So she was like, all right, like art school's not bad. And then my dad is a chef, and he's always like, I did what I want to do and I made it work. And so you have to do the same. It's not going to be easy. Like they weren't very strict on going accounting route. Like, they were very lenient for me, which isn't very normal. Right?
Yeah.
So.
And I think it can be scary, right? Because parents just want to know that you're taken care of. And the easy way to be taken care of is a 401k.
Right on.
Right. Like,
I went to the School of the Art Institute of Chicago, and I did painting, I did drawing, I did everything before college. And I had a little background in that. And then I went for like visual communication, which was like graphic design. And
yep. That's exactly what my degree's in, because that was like the employable art, right? Yeah. That was like the safe option.
Yeah. Yep. I just noticed that there's a very strong disconnect with what my mind and hand wanted to do, and then using the computer to make that. And it just didn't work out for me, and I wasn't into it. And so experimented in the clay studio at my school, and then I was just hooked. It was just every day I was at the studio from like morning to night, and then repeat all year long. And it was, yeah. But visual communication was good because it teaches you how to see shapes, like negative, positive, curves, and all that. And with pottery, like it's a similar way of looking at the curve of a pot, the proportions, but it's like a physical thing, and that's something, and you get to use it, and it just connected with me nicely.
Yep, absolutely. I connect with so much of what you just said, because also like for me, going from graphic design to the photography business, so many people would comment on my compositions as a photographer, and that was absolutely rooted in the graphic design studying, right? Of like understanding the rule of thirds, the golden mean, or whatever, and all of that then plays into like how I photograph pots or how I make pots, or my skills for pottery are not up to snuff to connect. The brain and the hands are still working on that integral connection, but we'll get there. So did you start your studio straight out of school then?
No, actually I worked quite a bit in Chicago for other artists. And so I worked at a production pottery with Nancy and Andy. They run a Circa Ceramic, and they make pop art ceramic production pottery, and Nancy does all the illustration on it and the decals. But Nancy does the illustration or silk screens it onto the pots. And Andy makes all the pottery and the clay forms and stuff. But they're awesome. They're like the nicest people, and I learned so much. Andy he's a really DIY type of person, so he makes all of like his equipment from like pieces he finds. Seeing that is just, for me, like out of college, I was just like, oh my God, that's amazing. You learn from, it was just a great experience. I worked there for 2 years, I think, 2.5 years. And then I also worked at a tile maker named Brian Kerrigan. He makes like industrial tiles that are like very meticulously handmade. He makes like one tile, and they're very architectural and in form. Okay. And he uses like a ram press, which is a giant hydraulic press, and he presses those. And I worked there for a couple years as well. When I think I was in college / out of college when I worked with him. And then that was another like great experience. It's like it's the material, but and another way to make stuff. And then I also worked for an artist named Deborah Handler, and she's more sculptural. And I don't think she would call herself a ceramic artist, but she would call herself more of an artist that works with clay. Okay. But she's very smart and knowledgeable, and like she's probably one of the smartest people I know, and she's awesome. Yeah.
It sounds like how much those different things to me all kind of outside looking in, all filter into what you're doing now in terms of the production skills required to make pieces for restaurants versus like the more interior artistic work. Like I'm curious to know how much all of those experiences informed like actually being able to set up a viable business, right? And make this thing work.
Yeah. And it's seeing them work, it helps me to figure out how I want to make it work for me. And that was like back then I didn't really think about it, but all that filters inside my subconscious. Oh, I remember like you're physically working and your body creates like body memory, like working out, doing the same motions every day. And then so your mind starts to think while you're working and it goes into your body and you're like 5 years later, you're just like, oh yeah, like I remember doing that and I can do this and differently and make it work for me.
Yeah. So how did you then get set up? Like jumping from working with other people, was it like a gradual, okay, I'm going to start to try and find myself clients, or were you like, all right, screw it, I'm going all in?
It was actually very slow. It's slow but rewarding. And that's how I like to describe my process of my artistic process, I guess, is I just take my time and let things happen organically. And I guess like after school, I moved back home to my parents' home and I set up a garage studio there. I'd work at the pottery and then come back home and then work on my own stuff. And then I'm at home. So it was nice and easy for me that way. Like I know a lot of people have a really hard time finding a space. And, I just got really lucky and I have loving, supportive parents and friends that they were like, all right, we know it's going to take a while. And my parents let me like set up the garage studio and it was great. And so I just focused.
Yeah. And that's one of the biggest difficulties with being in Chicago, right? Is that it's not like you can just, I mean, the fact that your parents even had a garage.
We're in the suburbs. So
Okay.
Like I would drive to the city every time I would work and stuff.
Gotcha.
When I got home. Yeah,
that makes it a little more sense now because I'm like, your parents had a garage?
It's like out of the city.
Gotcha. But where are you at now?
I'm in Chicago now.
Okay, because you moved, so you started in the garage studio and now walk me through the phases.
So I was in the garage studio for about 3 years.
Okay.
And then my old boss, Deborah, she found a studio out in Austin by Oak Park.
Yep.
And it's a very big industrial warehouse with private spaces. And so you get a space and you can build it out however well you want. Yep. And I was probably looking for a space for about 2 years that was affordable, clean as in like well-maintained building. And because the garage studio was pretty nice. Like it had like good concrete floors. I would say like 12-foot ceilings, 10-foot ceilings. It was like a normal garage. And it gets cold in the winter, but I just dealt with that. And so I guess like Deborah told me she found the space and I came to check it out. And she knew I was looking for a space and I was feeling defeated because I looked at like 20 spaces and it was I was like, damn. And then I came here and I was like, wow, it's actually pretty good. It's like really good. Yeah. Like, the neighborhood is it's in Austin, so it's a little sketchy, but the building was secure and I was like, all right, this will definitely work for me. And so I got lucky with that. And now, that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah. And that was part of the issue that we ran into. So Francesco's the full-time potter and like we were working out of just like the hobby studio that I just went to in Lincoln Square. But like for him to start his business, that place isn't set up to be a professional. It's not a professional shared space. It's a place if you want to go learn how to center, learn how to throw on the wheel, have it as a hobby. It's a wonderful community. We miss it dearly. But like for doing what you're doing, for doing what he wants to do, you get like 1, maybe 2 shelves to store work on. It's just not going to work. Like he could make enough work for 1 shelf in an hour.
Yeah.
And then it was like, okay, now what?
And that's the potter's dilemma is there's never enough shelving. You're always like, weird.
Yeah. Which is part of what makes it so hard to do this as a profession in an urban place like Chicago or like Camille in Brooklyn. And like so many potters live rurally because you can have a shed and then build another building when you need more shelves and just keep going. Yeah. But that's the thing. Like also then in Chicago, like depending on where you live, not necessarily wanting to have a 45-minute commute to go to where you can afford to have the studio.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're leaving at 11 o'clock at night, maybe you shouldn't be, and all the kinds of things.
Yeah.
So when you were looking for a studio space, were you outgrowing the garage where you were getting inquiries, you were getting people that were wanting to do large projects,
Yep.
and waited until that demand was at absolute capacity to be like, all right, I got to move?
Yeah, exactly. So like I was in the garage for about 3 years, and then things started taking off like very slowly, but I could see it's getting better every year. And it wasn't just restaurants, it was just like private commissions and then like interior designers, and like I was building shells in my garage for projects, and then I knew that I was gonna have this really big order coming, and so I was a little, oh my god, I think I can do it, but it's gonna be a pain in the ass to do it in here. And like right after I moved in, set up, I got that order. So it was just like the timing was perfect.
Yeah.
I think when I look back, like a lot of the times timing was always, it just naturally worked for me, like with projects and orders, and it's the way things just fell into place it's just, I think about that and it's just, wow, is it lucky or what happened?
Some people would say like when you take action on something, then you get would that big order have come through if you were still in a tiny space? Because when you're in a tiny space, you're basically telling the world like, this is my capacity. I don't know. That gets a little woo for all of us. Okay, so how did, like, with your dad being a chef, was that kind of the natural connection to working with restaurants, or did you set out from your experience with other ceramicists where you're like, this is what I want to do?
I worked for my dad when I was very young, like junior high school. He would tell me to help him out at the restaurant in the kitchen. And so I was always like working with my hands or doing something in his restaurant. And it like, restaurants are very fast paced. You're feeding people, but also like before you open, you're like prepping food, preparing for the next day. And like doing all that kind of stuff subconsciously came into me, like with working with clay. So I need to order this type of clay, this type of material for this project, and getting the logistics really translated well for me.
Yeah.
And for my dad's restaurant, he wants me to succeed. So he wasn't always, he'd talk about to his customers like what I do and stuff, but he wouldn't like give me customers. He can't like spoon feed this to me. So you have to figure it out how to do it for yourself so you'll survive later. And so I just started, like, I learned from like Andy and Nancy. They did a lot of art fairs. So I did a lot of art fairs, and I wasn't really into the website thing yet. So I would always just make a lot of stuff and then just bring it to art fairs all over Chicago and stuff. And just build up my clients like that. And then for restaurants, I guess, like for one art fair, it was, I forgot which one. It was in the West Loop somewhere.
Yeah.
It was the one in Plumbers Mall, Randolph Street Market.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Oh, that's a good one.
It was in like Plumbers Hall or something. And I did that like once or twice a month whenever they had it. And I'd always go there, sell my pots, pack up, come home, and then just, oh, okay, cool. No, keep making it. It's like a cycle. And I guess that's where I met like Michael Carlson. Like he's a famous chef in Chicago. And it's funny because it was like a rainy day and I didn't sell anything. And it was just like, I think everyone didn't do well. And so, but for me, it's like you bring all these pots and then you come with a bin that's just as full as when you came to set up. It's like really defeating. And it was like 10 minutes to the end of closing. And I see this guy just standing like maybe 10 feet away from my booth, staring at my stuff. And I noticed him and I was like, all right, there's only 10 minutes left. But if he comes like 5 feet closer, then I'll be like, hey, how's it going? Give him like the whole introduction of what I do and stuff. And he like took 1 or 2 steps closer. And then I was like, oh, maybe he's interested. I didn't know if he was going to buy her or not. I was just like, all right, if he takes 3 more steps, like I can tell him what I do. And then he comes up to me and starts looking at my plates and stuff. And I was like, oh yeah, hey, my name's David. These are all handmade by me. And like I gave him my whole like what I do speak, the rundown, and I was like, oh, they're all dishwasher, microwave safe. And so he's like, awesome, man. Like, you have 12 or 20 of these on you right now? And I was like, let me check. Damn, no, I only got 4 of them. And then he was, okay, let me take 20. How long will it take you to make it? And I was like, oh, okay, maybe like 4 weeks I can do that. And he's like, all right, cool. And then he pays for everything. And then he's like, this is my restaurant, writes it down, gives me a card. gives me the check, takes payment, and then gives me his number. And then I was like, holy shit, awesome, nice to meet you. I was like, what's your restaurant? And he's like, it's called Shuai. And I was like, well, I never heard of it. And he's like, well, it's a pleasure doing business with you. And yeah, I'll talk to you soon. And he walks off. And I was like, sweet, I got a good deal. And then the guy next to me, him and his partner did like handles, I think. And he was helping her. And she was like, or the guy was like, hey, do you know who that was? And I was like, no, I don't know. And then he's like, this is Marco Carlson. He's like a really famous Chicago chef. And I was like, whoa, that's cool. So then my frown from the day slowly got raised up. I was like, wow, I got like a cool client, you know? That was my entryway into the fine dining scene. And it was
just pure luck.
Yeah, pure luck. And, you know, I could have packed up 10 minutes, 5 minutes early, and I probably would have never have met that guy. But it's just like my mentality was just like, all right, it's not over till it's over. So keep working it. There's still people walking. You never know.
That is a really great point.
Yeah. So it was just like awesome. Like how that small little in my mind was something, just wait a little bit.
Yeah.
It led me into something bigger, you know?
Which who knows what he's thinking, you know? Like he might have been sitting there also wondering, okay, he had walked around the space and watched people packing up like a half hour early, being like, all right, because you can pass some judgment around somebody's work ethic or whatever. So then who knows why he was standing that far away for so long to be like, all right, is this kid going to just call it quits early or is he going to stick around? Who knows? That could have been, I don't know. Like you'll never know, but it's crazy because my brain thinks so clear cut of, oh, you had a connection to the restaurant industry. So you knew other chefs, so you could talk to those people. And I'm sure on some level now you can speak the language of like you understand what restaurants need in a more personal, intimate way than I would or anybody who hasn't had that experience. But what actually got you started was just happenstance, which is incredible. It's awesome. It just reminds me to stop trying to over plan. Like I'm one who's like, okay, if I can figure out how somebody did it and like backwards engineer to make it work, this is the way that it'll create the security that all of us in like entrepreneurship land. Mm-hmm. I think some people start their own business are totally okay with the risk factor, whereas I'm very risk averse. Mm-hmm. And so I'm always trying to figure out like, how can I backward engineer something to figure out how it works so that I know that it'll be okay. And that's just not.
I'm like, I guess for me, I'm always working. So my head's down, like in life, I'm really focused on working. And so it's like when I take a breath to look up and see where I'm at, it's turn back and I'm seeing like, wow, I had no idea I would come this way. I had that plan to go this way. It's like an ocean. Like you're just swimming. You think you're going straight, but you could go in a circle or you can go. It's very interesting. It's just a weird journey.
Yeah. It's like when you think your towel that you lay down on the beach is like right in front of you and you're actually a mile down the beach. You're like, oh crap. Well, so once that kind of kicked off, do you still do the shows? Because there's a lot of popular shows in Chicago, but from my perspective too, they're also really expensive. And like you've got to sit there all day long. And like you're saying, if the weather sucks, which is often, your turnout it's such a crapshoot to me.
Yeah, I don't do as many shows as I used to, but I remember like I did shows in the rain and then really windy days too. And that's crazy because one show I saw like tents flying. They would just roll on top of other people's tents.
Oh, God.
What the heck's going on?
Somebody's canvas is like just sailing down Randolph.
Yeah, I was like trying to keep it cool, but every breeze I was like holding down my tent.
Hi, I'm David. How is it going? And your hands actually just like death gripping the back of the tent.
And then I look to my left and my right and everybody's doing the same thing.
So where's the bulk of your time now? Where like, is there a couple of shows you still do just to do them or?
Yeah, I just did Renegade Craft Fair and that one was tremendous. It was like post-COVID and I was still gaining followers. People were following my work on Instagram like during COVID as well. And it's just surreal to like actually meet people that enjoy my work and talk to them. And it was like, oh man, so you worked 2 years for that show. And it's really nice to see people come out and introduce themselves and then like actually building a connection with my work to them because they're taking it home. And it gives me like happiness and strength that like, wow, like I'm making things one by one for these people that it's gonna be a precious piece for them. And so I have to like, don't lose my focus. If I don't do that, like you make a lot of pieces and you're like, oh, this one came out weird, but it's okay. That kind of thing. Like you start lowering your standards, but then when you see more people like actually taking it, it's, oh man, okay, got to keep it up.
Yeah.
That was just like a great show. Yeah, that's probably my only one of the year though. And shows are exhausting. It's like a completely different thing. Like making the work and selling the work at shows. Like making the work, easy. Selling it, bringing it, it's like something you can't control. You can't control the people coming in. You can't control who's buying it. It's just like such a big pool of people. And it's rewarding, but it's exhausting, you know?
Well, and how do you prepare? I've always been mind boggled by like how much inventory to take. Okay, you can best case scenario and make a whole bunch of stuff, but then if you make too much stuff and you're left with inventory you can't sell, then it's such a lost cost. That balance of...
I just bring everything. I got all these bins in my 20 or 30 bins, and I just pack everything in there and just bring it.
Yeah.
You never know what's going to sell because I make a lot of different types of pot, different colors. Like I like to experiment when I'm not doing commissions and stuff. So like a lot of the things I make there's a couple that are the same, like similar forms and glazes, but a lot of pieces are all really unique. And I never know who buys what, so I bring everything. And I look at what people buy, and they'll buy pieces that I made 3 years ago, 4 years ago, or like some that I make now.
Yeah. So it's not like you're going to a show saying, okay, I'm taking mugs, vases, and some new experimental thing, and that's it kind of thing. It's just a big old mix.
I do make like mugs, vases, and like plates and cups. But like I'll make teapots, and I'll just bring everything. So it's just a wide range of pieces.
Yeah. But now, so Renegade is obviously a big one. I think anybody listening who's in the Chicago area, or even, isn't there, I think there's like a New York Renegade. Like,
yeah.
In the U.S. at least, that's a known entity, so that makes sense to me. So, but is the bulk of your work now coming in through restaurants and interiors and commissions?
Yep, exactly.
Cool.
And it's interesting because it's usually I'll get like restaurant orders probably like January to February, I guess, is my like holiday month because it's or people's holidays is when I'm really busy because they're trying to buy gifts and everything. And so after that, I wouldn't say January to March, it's like slower.
Yep.
But it's good because then I can just relax a little. But most of my commissions start picking up for me like February to spring. And then summer to fall is like the art fair type of months, in the summer to fall. And then holiday orders are from fall to the end of the year. And it's like a cycle that I noticed for 4 years that has been pretty consistent. It could be like plus or minus a month off, but that was the general cycle because I feel like restaurants want to open in the spring because it's like after the cold and
because nobody in Chicago does anything from January to March. Exactly. Like trying to get somebody to come out to a new restaurant when it's negative 15 Fahrenheit and 10-mile-an-hour winds, and that's like a good day.
Yeah.
No, sir. Yeah, that makes sense. So you can focus on different areas of your business in different seasons of the year. That's awesome.
Exactly. I'm sure it's different for everybody, or not different for everybody. It's a similar spectrum.
Yeah. The holiday time for sure, across the board, period. That's even true for me with photography, is like fall. I was just having this conversation with friends the other day. Everybody loves fall, right? Everybody loves fall. And I'm sitting over here going, nope, I do not love fall. Don't tell any of my clients. Because everybody loses their minds. It's like you get that first 50-degree weather day and everyone's reminded of the fact that winter is coming. And they're like, oh my God, we have to get our family photos, or we have to get our engagement pictures or whatever. Yeah. And spring is a lovely time to take photos. Like when the trees are blooming, it's actually prettier to me than when they're dying. So, but everybody just loses their mind in the fall. And so it's just like this, much like you guys for the holiday sales, you will do a half a year's or a 3/4 of your year's worth of revenue in 2-3 months.
Yeah.
But you also, I don't know if you have this problem or if you've spread out your making cycle differently. You only have so much capacity of your time for how much work you can get done. Like you might have interest in orders coming in.
Yeah.
But like, how do you manage? Yeah.
I guess, so the technique I use, there's like slip casting, and then there's mold, like press molding and jiggering. And my thing is I wheel throw everything. And the technique is you make it's off the hump throwing. And
Yep.
so I make everything off the hump. So that helps with production a lot, it saves up a lot of time. And I took a master class in Korea the year before COVID with the production potter, or he's Poonchung ceramic master, Kwakung.
Okay.
And then so I went there to like try to really refine my off the hump throwing to be very quick, but quick and still make very unique pots. And that actually helped me a lot on my production. Marco Minetti was his assistant. And so like Master Kwok was, he doesn't really speak English. So like his apprentice would translate everything. But my Korean's pretty, I can communicate, but I can understand it, but I can't communicate back that well. But it was a nice learning experience. You just see new pots in a new world, or like completely new world. Yeah. I brought that knowledge back, and I'm trying to incorporate it into my own style making. And it was a great experience.
I think that's a really good point because there's so many makers I talk to who we've had the experience, right? You touch that clay and you're like, man, this is it. Let me do this all day, every day. And so they're so anxious to want to go full time.
Yeah.
But I feel like there's not a lot of resources out there that talk about the skills needed as far as if you're going to make this a full-time living, you need, for some makers, like production is a dirty word, right? Nobody wants to do that kind of thing. And I'm like, yeah, but if you need to sell 200 mugs a month, for example, I'm just pulling numbers and examples for the sake of conversation. Do you want to work 80 hours a week or do you want to work 40 hours a week? There's a certain level of skills accrual that you have to have in order to sleep.
Yeah, I think there's in the like Potter's Handbook or something, probably by Bernard Leach. He said like that was written in like the 40s, 30s or something, and I think he said production potters should be able to make 100 pots a day. But then he's probably selling his pots for like $20, $10 back then, and so there is a level for me. I throw 50 to 100 depending on the piece and stuff. But now I just try to keep it a little lower because it's very taxing to throw that much every day.
Yeah, physically. You've got to make sure you're doing all the ergonomic things. That was the interesting thing when I did the studying I did in Italy. Like the first day, all they did was go around and watch how you threw to adjust your body. That's it. We didn't talk about anything with clay. They literally just, and I was the only one standing to throw it, threw everybody off. Everybody else was sitting. So everybody's looking at me like, oh, that's interesting. I'm like, yeah, guys, like I've messed up my shoulders and neck and back tension enough with having to carry camera gear around all the time. But yeah, like having a tilted stool or having the wheel at just the right height or whatever, like they adjusted everybody's equipment then that whole day to make sure you were in the right space.
Yeah.
Yep. What's kind of real life look like? Like so you're on your own? Do you have an assistant or like how does it all work for you from a day to day?
So I used to work crazy amount. Like I do 12 to 14 hours every day. And then I noticed the quality. I mean, I'm 31 now, but I used to do that in my 20s. I would do that much work. And I learned how to control my hands better when I worked that hard. But then I noticed it's hard to keep up that focus mixed with the physical. And I just try to keep about 10 hours a day now. And
a very reasonable.
It's a lot of work. Like I'm thinking about an assistant, but it's how do I make that worthwhile for them? Because I do everything by myself, and do I want them to make clay all day? And who wants to do that? And sweep and clean the studio. It's something I'm still figuring out. Like how do I make it fair for both of us? I'm sure they want to learn from me, but then how do I teach them while still making? And I think I'm getting it, like figuring out how to do that, but it's still I don't have a blueprint yet, but it's in my head. But yeah, it's 10 hours, like 6 days a week probably, and I'll try to take a day off Sunday, and Saturdays would be like half days. But I like to work, so it's like exciting for me. But then my physical is getting a little worn down, so it's always fluctuating. Like,
Is that as soon as you turn 30, it's 30 plus 1 day, and your body's, hey, guess what?
yeah.
Things are about to change, my friend. Because the interesting thing, too, for me, as far as with the restaurant orders and the production, where the scalability can be as an independent maker, because your option is basically, as I see it, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm phrasing this as a statement, but it's actually a question. Like, from my perspective, the option is either charge more per piece over time, just continually keep raising your prices per piece, and your production actually stays the same, but you can earn a little bit more and make it more and more sustainable because you're just charging more per piece, or figure out a way to be able to produce more, either bring on help or what have you, like the artists that you worked with before you started your studio, have additional help so that you can sell more, more items. Maybe there's a third option. I don't know.
I try to price my pieces so that it's fair, no matter how big or small. I try to, like, every order, I'll try to get something that I'll give myself enough time to make it and give myself my share of my salary or my pay for it, that it works out. And then when I see like a list of all the things I have to make, I can organize how to be efficient with the making process so that things go out smoothly and people will get their pieces on time. And then if they want to like a quick order, then I'll be like, oh yeah, no, that's not going to happen. My timeline is very strict.
How far out do you set? Do you set that a month at a time or kind of a quarterly rhythm?
Yeah, like if it's like 100 pieces, I'd say 4 to 6 weeks, and then anything more than that, I would say 6 to 8. I also know how my clay works, like how it will dry, if I can power dry it or not, then it push out things a lot quicker, you know? Yeah.
And also the time of year in Chicago, right? Like stuff isn't going to dry in August the way it's going to dry in February.
There's like a 2 week or 3 week, maybe it was all of August. I don't remember because the humidity was so intense. So everything was just like blurry. I'll look at a pot. Usually it'll take a day or two to be ready to trim and then dry. And I'll look at it and it'll be like still wet. Come back next day, still wet. And then it took like
next week.
Yeah. And I was like, what the heck's going on? And then I'm just like, it's mixed with that humidity. I was like, I'm starting to see stuff. I don't know. Like, it was crazy.
This is why all of Italy just takes off August for a month. Like, we just need to adopt the European approach of let's just not have August. Let's just do something else with our lives. I love it. I love it. Is there anything now that you feel like looking back, you would have either wish you would have known or done differently, or if you were starting all over again?
I think I would really like to travel a lot more, to apprentice with different potters and just see more. I guess the one thing I've never really done was apprentice under a potter, like someone that's processing their own materials, doing their own clay. And that's something I really wish I did. But then I'm thinking if I did do that, I would definitely not have gone the production pottery route, because I have the most respect for those type of potters. It's a beautiful lifestyle, you know, like very close to the material and quiet, slow life.
Yeah. The exact opposite of Chicago. Well, is there anything that surprised you or is different than you expected?
I'm amazed at all the different types of people I've met through making ceramics, you know. I met interior designers and then all these different clients, from hotels to people in the hotel, and seeing how hotel accounting works, which is very slow, but you know, you get your money, but it takes a while, kind of thing. And also, I think with clay, it's like I had my professor in college. One of them was Mie Congo, and she's like a very great slip caster. Like, she makes beautiful molds and she makes these awesome, playful sculptures with it. And she was always helpful to me. And her husband is Charlie Yan, and they're just great friends that helped me grow as a potter. Like I make production pottery, but like they're more Charlie and me are like they're slower paced and they make very beautiful objects. And Charlie's a potter, and I learned a lot of my appreciation from his style of making. He processes wood ash and has wood kiln. He makes his own clay formulas and glaze formulas that creates a very unique pot for him.
Yep.
And then I did a modeling thing for this.
I was just going to say you're a model now.
Yeah,
So there's a plot twist.
Yeah, it was company so I guess I did this. There's a restaurant named Kasama, and I did a plate set for them. They were hosting an event where influencers would get a food kit of their dish and then my plate, and they would follow along and make the thing.
Do it at home.
Yeah, and then one of those influencers worked for No Tray, and she received a plate from me, and she's friends with a photographer there, and they reached out to me to do like a photo shoot of me wearing like expensive clothing and making pots, and I was like, what? Like, well,
you realize it's going to get muddy, right?
Yeah. I looked up the price on the clothes, and they're like $2,000 for like jeans and a shirt, and they said, no, don't worry, we knew where we were coming. And the clothes they gave me were it's kind of called Landon or something, Loving or something. It's like from Paris, but like they did like this series of artist series where an artist actually painted on their clothes and made it look like a art jeans and art dress shirt kind of thing, and it was super fun. Like they were great, and it was just a surreal experience. Like I never thought that would lead like making like I just wanted to make pots, and then someone would reach out to you, hey, you want to model for us? I was like, what? And then like model making pots. I was like, yeah, sure, why not?
As long as do I still get to make pots? Okay, we're good.
Yeah, like I was actually making pots for an order I had to do, which was pretty funny.
That's hilarious. You were like, still actually. That's so funny. That's a really good point and an interesting piece of becoming self-employed. You have to stay open to so many different outlets, right? Of getting your name out there in so many different ways that might not have been part of the original vision. Who knows where this could lead now? If you've got interior designers in Paris, that wouldn't be a bad gig.
Yeah, I just think it's like an incredible journey. I don't try to look too far ahead, and I don't try to look too far back. And I just try to focus like on what I'm making right now. And sometimes I'll lose focus like that. I'll be like, oh, my mind would wander, like I'll daydream. But then I try to be focused right now because every piece I make, it's going to be for someone, a commission, or it's going somewhere. And I got to keep that level of making to whatever my standards are, how I think is a good pot. Or I like to make people happy with what they receive. So you don't want a shitty pot, so it's
to get too far ahead thinking, oh, I wish something else. And so you're not sticking to the commitment that you have right now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a good point. Because that's the difficulty I have being self-employed is just how many different roles you have to, like, I enjoy the challenge, the mental challenge of you're not just in one. If we had both wound up as graphic designers, we would have gone to an office every day. We would have sat at the desk. We would have done whatever projects we got given, and you wouldn't have been involved in every aspect of a business the way you are when you are the only one, which is super rewarding and challenging, but also at the same time, it can feel like you're being pulled in every direction. And so being able to have that focus that we all need as makers to dive deep on a project, to discover something creatively, come up with new ideas, I find can be really difficult because you've got to be an Instagram influencer now. You've got to do this. You've got to do this.
Yeah, potting is my main, like making pots is my main thing, but it's so like my Instagram game or like website, it's so low. Like I know that I could improve on it, but it's like I look at the clock, it's 9 a.m. and then I look back and it's 3 p.m. And then I look back, I got to go home and sleep. And I forgot to take pictures of what I'm working on and stuff. Yeah, it's a lot of juggling.
But I think that's a beautiful reminder because you're focused first and foremost on making your work. You're getting plenty of work in the door, presumably. They're probably we always maybe wish for more. I don't know. But like you're paying the bills, you're taking care of yourself, you're living a good life, you're making the work that you want to make without having to become an Instagram influencer in today's world, I feel like is really important, because that there can be that pressure of, at least my brain, oh, if I don't do this, then I won't have a business. If I don't market, if I don't post or share or engage or whatever it is, then this all disappears.
Yeah.
Which is not necessarily true. And I'm just saying this mostly for myself. Out loud.
Yeah.
How, kind of wrapping things up, because I know we're right at about an hour and I want you to be able to get back to those pots. How, just thinking kind of real life, what is that flow of the days to be able to manage the business? Do you have a schedule that, okay, I answer emails on this day or this time, or you just make as much as possible and fit in the rest where you can? Or
I do a to-do list. I do it's just very simple. I'll do stuff I need to get done in the week. I'll write everything down. And then when I do that, I can see everything in one thing. I have a marker board and I write everything down this week. And then I'll look at that board and then I'll look okay, I'll start narrowing things down this, wheel throwing. I have to make these pots today, these pots today, these pots, so that they can trim on this day. And then I'll look at, it'll be update website. I'll put an asterisk there, and then I won't do that till next week. But I'll just write down everything I need to do. It just helps me visualize the sense of time that I have for a project, and I'll do that every week. And then next to that, I'll do it today, and then tomorrow what I want. So just leveling my priorities.
Yep,
and that's been working for me really well. And then for email stuff, I look at that when I get home at night. Sometimes I'll look at it when my hands are not messy. I'm just checking my email, but I won't reply during that time. I try to really focus when I'm working in the studio.
I think that's the best part about pottery and ceramics to me is yep, can't touch my phone, covered in mud. Sorry. Bye, world.
But there is that, Instagram's so addicting. You can see so many different art and pots on it. It's sometimes I'll flip and I'll be, whoa. And then I'll look at the time. It's 15, 20 minutes are gone. No, But
only 15 or 20 minutes? Shoot, I feel like you can do that. You can spend an extra 20 minutes in the bathroom because you start looking through Instagram.
Yeah.
I'm just hypothetically. I wish I had a follow-up question because that's a very awkward statement to end this conversation. Oh my goodness. All right. So regardless of whether or not you're going to be updating it, is Instagram the best place for people to find you? Where do you want people to come see all the work that you are putting out in the world?
Instagram is the best place. I really like the stories things. People can follow along what I do every day. I'll use it to just do a quick Snapchat or snapshot of what I'm doing. And I really like that. Yeah, Instagram is the best way. Or email, if you have any questions or anything.
Yeah, awesome. I will link your Instagram in the show notes because I think most people, as I've heard from everybody who sends in awesome messages, definitely listens to the podcast while their hands are muddy. So there's no sense in nobody's typing it out as they're listening anymore. Awesome, David. Thank you so much for taking the time. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, this is great.
And that wraps up episode 204 of Maker's Playbook. As I mentioned, you can find a clickable link to David's Instagram, which is DTK Ceramics, in our show notes. And if you have no idea what these show notes are that I speak of, well, it kind of depends on what podcast app you're using to listen. So honestly, the best bet is to just visit the website for all the details of every episode. Hop on over to makers-playbook.com/podcast and click through to your favorite episodes for all kinds of clickable resources. Speaking of resources, I know all you makers are in the madness of holiday sales season preparation or thick of shop updates, all of it, shipping, packaging, all the things. And if you're selling your pieces online, then I probably shouldn't have to explain to you the importance of great, consistent photography, not to mention how that increases your sales. Now, I know you don't have time right now to deep dive down our entire Baker's photography styling system, which is the 6-week course you may or may not have heard about that we launched and sold out last summer. So, That's why I have our photography cheat sheet. This is just a simple, free, downloadable PDF with literally 3 quick and easy steps to ensure you have more consistent, professional-looking photos. And this is even if you're only using your cell phone. You can use the DSLR, but you can also just use a cell phone. Doesn't matter. So go snag that at makers-playbook.com/learn-photography-for-ceramicist. Now, I know that is an awkwardly long URL to remember. When I made the page, I did not think about having to read it out loud on a podcast. So just go to makers-playbook.com and click on the big button in the top right-hand corner that says Get Free Photo Tips, and you'll be taken right there. Or you could just click the link in the episode description on whatever podcast app you're listening to this. Honestly, that's probably the easiest. Just wipe your hands off right now, hit pause, click info or description or whatever your podcast app says, and a link to our photography cheat sheet will be right there. All right. Until next week, my friends, go get back to making your dreams a reality, because together, we've got this.